Welcome to another edition of Geopolitics and Empire. As always, I need your support to become a paid subscriber on the Substack. Go to the website. You can see all the places you can donate for the podcast there. You can purchase a consult if you want to chat with me. Got a bunch of affiliates you can check out if you purchase from them. That supports the podcast. And, subscribe on all the socials, leave podcast reviews, that sort of stuff. Returning to the podcast has been quite a while is lecturer in geopolitics and international, and he's also an international politics PhD candidate, Stuart J. Hooper. Welcome back to the podcast, Stuart.
Thanks so much, Vori. Great to be back with you. And I haven't actually spoken to you one-on-one since your TNT days, so it's been a really long time. But always loved our discussions. Love the fact that you come at this kind of straight down the middle. You're not really all the way to the left or all the way to the right, but willing to talk to everyone, listen to everyone, and consider all sides, which apparently more and more people just cannot do. So, great to be back with you.
Yeah, and it's a minefield where, the left and right both get a few things right, and both get many things wrong, I think. And so we just lately I've been saying you got to take off your red MAGA hat and think critically. But also, you do great analysis on your X and YouTube, and of course, as of late, you're doing your PhD stuff, and so you're very busy. And you've been putting out less there, but there's so much to talk about. I mean, the Trump and Saudi Arabia and all this, but India, Pakistan, Israel, Ukraine. Where should we start?
I think maybe let's start with Trump. I think what you just said there in terms of the MAGA hats and taking off the MAGA hat, and that might be a good thing to do. I'm kind of with you on that. So I think Trump came into office with huge promise. So much promise, in fact, that he may have made claims and promises that were perhaps a little bit too big to be able to fulfill when he actually came into office. But I think he still does have some promise left in him. I think he still does have the ability to reach the heights that he was so clearly aiming for. But I think when it comes to Trump, the people that should really be holding him to account, it's not the Democratic Party, it's not Joe Biden, it's definitely not Kamala Harris. It should actually be his most central supporters, in my opinion, that should really be holding him to account. Hey, Donald Trump, you said you were going to put America first. What are you doing to achieve that? You said you were going to get us out of these foreign wars. What are you doing to achieve that? We don't care about Greenland. We don't care about Canada. We don't care about all of these other big ideas that apparently you're now selling us. We just want you to put America first, pave the roads, have good paying jobs, have the ability to send our kids to good schools, and let's come back from this absolute adventurism that has essentially bankrupted the country, destroyed the international reputation of the United States on many levels. But I think, like I said, Trump really could do this if he wanted to. If he really wanted to bring the country back, that would absolutely be possible. But I published an article actually with you over on Geopolitics and Empire.com, I think right before Trump came into office, entitled Stars and Stripes Globalism, where Trump started to have this message of, he kept saying this over and over again, they keep telling me that we need Greenland for national security. They keep telling me that we need the Panama Canal. They keep telling me that we need Canada. Well, who exactly is the they in that equation? Who has been in Donald Trump's ear, sending him down this path of stars and stripes globalism? Who has he been listening to? Because I can tell you for sure, it's not his base. His base did not want him to do any of this sort of thing. His base wanted him to come home, fix the country, rebuild it from within, and then think about perhaps increasing or improving the international reputation of the United States once again. But right now, with the state of the country domestically, all people want is a better America for themselves, their families, and their futures. So I think the MAGA crowd should hold Donald Trump to account more than anyone else. And we are actually seeing this. Marjorie Taylor Greene. She is the best example of this, I would say right now. She, of course, has been 100% MAGA on every single imaginable topic. But she's also started to, I really think, hold Trump to account on this foreign adventurism. She's been putting out lots of tweets recently about not starting new wars, about not agitating foreign enemies, about not supporting necessarily foreign countries and foreign wars. And she's really been, I think, trying to make Trump live up to the promise that he had on the campaign trail. So all of us don't really have to agree with Marjorie Taylor Greene on everything. And of course, she's one of the people in Congress that has made some truly outlandish statements on a lot of things here and there. But at least on this, she appears to be helping to hold Trump to account. Because guess what? She knows if Trump goes down this road of stars and stripes globalism, of adventurist foreign policy under another name, that the Republican Party is going to be toast in the midterm elections. So she is actually really looking out for her own future in some ways, but also broadly the future of the Republican Party, which I've argued in tweet after tweet at this point, that if Trump keeps going down a path that doesn't live up to his campaign promises, that doesn't fulfill the agenda that he said he actually did have, that he may find himself in a position where there becomes a large chorus of Republicans that turn on him in the Congress. Because what does a congressman care about? More than anything else? Getting reelected. They may not be reelected just simply for the fact that they have an R next to their name, the fact that they are Republicans, if they're associated with Trump and he goes completely off the rails. So again, this is why it's so important. The MAGA crowd, MAGA supporters, Republicans in Congress, it's your job to keep Donald Trump on track. Get him away from this shadowy group that apparently is putting something in his ear, and remind him what he promised you and what he sold you and what he said his agenda was going to be. And if you keep him on track, we could have a president that leaves a real lasting geopolitical legacy that may actually put the world in a better place.
And yeah, I mean, so much is going on. I'm gonna share my screen real quick, which I don't do often, but maybe I should. And I often like to let the news cycle, news stories to marinate a bit before giving a quick opinion. And Richard Grove, on whose show I was on recently, he said the same thing. You got to give it a few days to let the dust settle and figure out what's going on. And Trump in Saudi Arabia, Cryptagon, by the way, shout out to Cryptagon, great blog. They want to raise the debt ceiling. Besant came out talking about that. At the same time, the largest weapons deal ever, $600 billion to Saudi, and meeting with the Syrian terrorist President Trump and with MBS. It looks like they were having a huge party in Saudi Arabia, and like everything was going great. At the same time, there was this interesting proposal from Iran about creating a joint nuclear enrichment venture involving regional Arab countries and American investments as an alternative to Washington's demand that it dismantle its nuclear program. And how I see a lot of this for now, it seems to be a bit of continuation of this sort of Abraham Accords, New Middle East peace thing that Trump is selling. But I always keep in the back of my mind that at any moment, all hell can break loose. And that is just goes up in smoke. And then I've mentioned before, they've got this trajectory of making some deal, regime changing Iran, and upgrading Abraham Accords to Cyrus Accords, where you have this new Middle East with Iran and Israel and the Gulf. But again, anything can happen on the turn of a dime. But yeah, I guess as you say, there's a chance, as Jim Carrey was saying, Dumb and Dumber. No.
Yeah, always a chance. And I try to be optimistic most of the time, although it is increasingly tough when you look at the state of the world. But yeah, when you look at Iran in particular, this is probably a good time to shift into Iran as perhaps our next topic of discussion here. Yeah, this is a country that the United States and the world does not need to be going to war with under any circumstances, because that is not going to go well on numerous levels. Primarily, if Iran is destroyed, you're going to create yet another massive power vacuum in the Middle East. How has that worked out in every single other Middle Eastern, Central Asian country where that's taken place? Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, Syria, the list goes on and on. Every single time that this has been done, an intervention to try to topple some supposed enemy, it's never done anything good in the grand scheme of things. So with Iran, you're going to create another power vacuum, you're going to create more global chaos, and you're going to create endless suffering for the Iranian people in particular. But beyond the Iranian people, everything that I'm seeing from serious military analysts, you've probably seen it too, the idea of a military conflict with Iran is something that serious military people are telling you is a very bad idea on a military level. Not just the political level, like I just discussed previously, but on a military level too. Iran has legitimate capabilities when it comes to fighting a military conflict. How many thousands, perhaps tens of thousands, of Americans will need to die to topple the government of Iran? That number is far higher than it needs to be and can simply be avoided by just not going down this path to begin with. But there is, of course, a massive chorus of people right now within and around the American government that want to go to war with Iran. There is clearly a neocon faction that is pretty close to the White House, if not in the White House, in various positions. And there is this threat that, as you said, this could blow up at any given time. And if it does, that's not going to be good for anyone. I think Israel, Netanyahu in particular, believes that it's going to be good for Israel. I don't think so. I mean, you look at these tit for tat missile exchanges that we had last year between the two sides. I think Iran demonstrated on a couple of occasions that it has the capability to hit Israeli targets, to hit them accurately, and to cause damage if it wants to. So for all of this hyping up of the threat of a nuclear Iran, I think Iran's already demonstrated that it doesn't need even nuclear weapons to cause massive damage to Israel. So again, why are we opening this door? Why are we going down this path? Who does this really serve? Well, where I always usually come back to in my analysis is the military-industrial complex. If the war with Ukraine ends up winding down within the coming weeks and months, I think you're going to see this push for a war with Iran go into overdrive. And we've already started to see some of that as well. So the second that you got these stories that started to come out about rift perhaps between Netanyahu and Trump, and the fact that Trump has tried to back away from going to war with Iran, that apparently he's told Netanyahu it's not going to happen. Well, then all of a sudden, what did we get? We got those news stories about secret nuclear sites that have now been found in Iran. Well, that sounds eerily similar to all of the rhetoric that got us into Iraq. I was, I think, 12 years old at the time when that war started. I remember as clear as day, the big headline on all the British newspapers at the time was that Saddam Hussein can hit London in 40 minutes, I think it was, or 40, 30 minutes, something like that. But that was the headline. Saddam Hussein can hit London in 20 minutes. Be afraid. We have to go and get him or else we're all going to die. That's what they're trying to tell us. And it's playing out right before our eyes once again. So we've seen this play out before. We know how this story ends, and it's not well. It's not well for anyone involved. So this needs to be avoided at all costs for the future of geopolitics broadly. But also, I think it's really time to put the leash on the military-industrial complex. It's about to hit $1 trillion budget in the United States. I mean, that's beyond ridiculous. I mean, you look at the next top 4 countries below the United States in terms of their spending, and it doesn't even come close. You have to add up the next, it varies, but somewhere from the next 10 to 12 countries combined to actually meet the amount of money that the US alone is spending on its military. And that includes countries like Russia and China and the United Kingdom and Germany, big, powerful countries. So the US needs to get this under control, but it seems like, and we'll cover some of these stories as we go along here, that's not really happening. Although that story you just pointed to there, I think that's an interesting one. This idea of an enrichment deal between the United States, some regional countries, and the Iranians themselves. I think that's the Iranian leadership trying to take a smart approach to this, because the Iranian leadership also doesn't want to go to war with the West. It doesn't want to go to war with Israel. It may survive it. I don't think in the long term it probably would survive it. But broadly, the Iranian leadership is starting to look at Trump, start to analyze what he's doing, and starting to ask questions of, well, how do we get out of this? How do we get ourselves out of checkmate here? How do we ensure that we continue to survive, that we can continue to exist in this world? And I think this is the type of deal that could get that done. But if it doesn't get it done, where has Iran been moving over the past decade, really, but really the last 5 years in particular? Iran has been moving increasingly closer to both China and Russia. So this is also a point on war with Iran that I've mentioned in my analysis over and over and over again. The West, Israel, Netanyahu, they're almost trying to bet that the Russians and the Chinese are just going to sit back and say, yeah, you know what? Go ahead and topple Iran. We're going to let that happen. I don't think that's going to be the case. We already saw Russia intervene in Syria. Will Russia step in to defend Iran? Will China step in to defend Iran? I think there is at least a slight chance of that happening. Then where does that lead you down the road of? Well, again, something that I've been trying to warn people of for a very long time now, World War III. There are multiple flashpoints for World War III all over the world right now. The Middle East, Eastern Europe, the Far East, Central Asia, far more flashpoints than we need. So the deal with Iran needs to be the total focus of the Trump administration, which again, I think, just to return to him and his administration for a second, this whole deal with the tariffs and everything that he's been trying to do there, I think ultimately is not being the right thing to do. It hasn't really worked out. The idea that if you just put tariffs on foreign countries that manufacturing is going to spring up in the United States, it's just not going to happen. But Trump, in doing this, is giving himself more and more and more problems, when instead what he needs to be doing is focusing on things like the Iran deal, focusing on Gaza, Israel, focus on Ukraine. So if he can get his focus onto these things and get the deal that needs to be done, perhaps we can bring the world back from the brink, at least in maybe one or two of these situations.
Yeah, just a few quick comments for me again. As you said on Iran. From a diplomatic standpoint, it makes sense what Iran is trying to do. You laid it out perfectly, to escape from checkmate. But at the same time, I see, the foreign minister of Iran came out pointing out the obvious. Iran has called attention to the double standards of the international community regarding nuclear weapons. Basically, he said, raising concerns about Iran's peaceful nuclear work while ignoring Israel's nukes is unacceptable. And I believe the Israeli spokesperson was asked a question to that regard some days ago, to which she flipped out. But let's be fair, guys. Iran doesn't have nukes. Israel secretly, illegally obtained them in the 50s and 60s. So they have them, but they haven't declared them. So no one's following the rules here. But also I found it interesting, just on the Syria point. And I only realized this recently. So I've been calling him Julani, the head of Syria, but that wasn't his real name. It's Al-Shara. But I just found it interesting that what appears I'm looking at the bigger picture. It's like the world empire. It's shoring itself up, and so it's going country by country. They'll come to a country where first they play nice, John Perkins style. We'll give you money. We'll give you girls. Oh, you don't want that? Okay, we're going to blackmail. Okay, you don't care about that? We're going to take you out. We're going to regime change you. And so, yeah, it seems like they've gotten Syria now because it's Al Shara now. He's being welcomed by Macron. You saw that by MBS. They didn't do that with Assad, right? And so it's like the head of Syria is now the globalist approved president. He's now in the camp, and now Iran remains. And what do we do with Iran? They've got this tango now, and also, as you alluded to earlier, this whole spat with Netanyahu. Like, we've seen this before with Trump administration one. Like, we're friends with Israel and Netanyahu. Oh, he burned me. I forget the exact deals from Trump. Remember in the first Trump administration towards the end, Netanyahu blew him off, and now they were friends again, and then now they're not friends. Like, I think this is all World Wrestling Federation stuff, World Wrestling Entertainment, and it's just as you said. It's this good cop, bad cop, basically. Oh, look at this new field Iran is working on. We got to bomb them. And so I think it's unclear how it's going to go. But as you said, I think there's a group that wants to bomb Iran, and so I think eventually, there's going to be people pushing towards war for Iran, and that's linked to the economic situation as well. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you want any thoughts on Israel-Gaza from here.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, it's absolutely possible that this is, like you said, World Wrestling Federation level stuff, where this is just all on the surface. I think with Trump and Netanyahu, though, I think there is something there where there is a kernel of truth to the idea that Trump actually doesn't really like him that much, and expects a lot more deference from Netanyahu than he probably gets on a lot of occasions. But yeah, in terms of Israel-Gaza in particular, I posted earlier that I don't think we yet truly understand the full extent to which Israel's international image has been completely destroyed as a result of what it's done in Gaza. We now have multiple mainstream news outlets that are posting stories just purely on the impact of the Israeli airstrikes. Now, of course, when all this started, whenever you'd watch a mainstream news report, it would always start with the October 7th stuff and what happened there, and then go into what Israel was doing. And of course, that's trying to justify the events that you were seeing. But you're now starting to see this flip where even the mainstream media outlets can no longer try to quote unquote justify this in any real way. So there was a Channel 4 report that came out that's entitled something like the one Israeli airstrike that killed 15 members of one family. I mean, that is that's political rhetoric. That's media right there. That is like a sledgehammer to the international image of Israel. And we do see this in some ways in polls that are starting to come up now with increasing numbers of Americans that do not approve of Israel, that do not think the United States should be supporting Israel. And I think you're starting to see this from more and more and more figures as well. I think Tucker Carlson, he hasn't necessarily directly said this, but he's kind of been leading the charge on this in terms of, well, why is the United States supporting Israel? Why is it supporting a foreign country with all of this level of support that it gets? Why is it doing it for this one and no one else? And you're starting to see more and more people in the alternative media sphere that are also turning their back on Israel in various ways. So this, in terms of the future of Israel, is not good. So if you go to war with Iran, you open yourself up to military destruction. If you continue on this war with Gaza and just the endless slaughter of Palestinians, which I haven't seen a number on that now in terms of the number of dead, but we got to be well up there now at this point. We've got to be well into the hundreds of thousands, at least, directly and indirectly as a result of the starvation, the lack of water in the strip. we're also looking potentially at the political destruction of Israel as well. We've already seen a massive brain drain that's happened in Israel, where the educated, at least somewhat economically wealthy people have been able to get out and leave and go elsewhere. What's going to be left? If your best and brightest are all leaving, you're under constant threat of war through, in what many people would say, argue are the results of your own actions. I mean, what is the future here? Does Israel just hit the big red button like you were just discussing and just decide, you know what, it's time to go out with a bang. We're going to fire off the nukes and we're going to show the world that we can do what we want to do? Well, I mean, good luck with that. I don't think that's going to go over well either. So I think Netanyahu, his government, has really painted itself into a corner here. It doesn't really have a meaningful political way out. You saw Trump, of course, crash his way headfirst into this debate, as he does with a lot of things, talking about the relocation of Palestinians, the idea of, I think he even posted, right, that AI-generated video of what Gaza could be, and there's all these golf courses and beachfront hotels. This is not the way forward here. I'm not entirely sure what the way forward is at this point. It's certainly not Hamas, so I can tell you that for sure. And something else that I haven't really seen anyone cover too much in the mainstream media or the alternative media for that matter is that there have been massive protests, we're talking thousands of people, inside Gaza against Hamas. So we have Palestinians that are also now figuring out that there is no violent solution to this problem, that Hamas is not doing anything for them, and that violence is clearly not the answer on either side. So yeah, I think all sides are ready for a big change and need a big change, but I don't think anyone's come forward with a plan on exactly what that should be. And I certainly don't have one either, but I guess we should be open to ideas.
Yeah, I'd agree. I mean, we saw recently, well, I think Israel's talking about how they're preparing to go again into Gaza, but supposedly we had this spat with Trump where America's going to take over control of Gaza. So the way forward is not clear. And I just, on Israel, just shared this one more point. This was posted recently.
Iran is the chief of staff of the foreign ministry. And I want to tell you something. A decade ago, when I started this, I had a vision of establishing an ambassador program.
So basically here it says that Israel is going to recruit over 10,000, Christian American pastors, youth leaders, educators, social media influencers as friends of Zion ambassadors. And myself as a Christian is like, I don't like this. Our commission is just to go and preach Jesus, including to the Jews and the Israelis. And it's not to support Israel or Israelis in this sense where their motivation is anti-Christ. They don't support Christ. They've rejected him. So we should be supporting them and trying to get them to believe in Jesus and not sort of being at their beck and call. And again, I've said previously I support a state of Israel, but again, that doesn't mean giving a blank check to now, let them go wild. And what you were saying, increasingly, Financial Times recently, the editorial board, Thomas Friedman, New York Times, they're all now putting out papers on how going against Israel. And, this could also fit into biblical prophecy because in the Bible, it says towards the later days, Israel becomes increasingly ostracized. And, even from God's perspective, rightfully so, of their own accord, because they've rejected Jesus and now they're just behaving in a totally mad fashion. And so that can also fit theologically of where we're headed. Should we jump to Ukraine?
Yeah, let's do it.
So, in recent days, Yuri Roshka, former Moldovan politician, he's been on the podcast. He just wrote an op-ed commenting on, I think tomorrow, supposedly there was going to be this talk in Istanbul between Zelensky and Putin. It looks like Putin is chickening out. And so even Badra Kumar, the former Indian diplomat, has commented and saying like, Putin's being retarded. He's chickening out. Like it's not looking good for Russia in that sense in terms of negotiations. And then we've also got Cocainegate, as you mentioned. But what are your thoughts on where we're at with Ukraine?
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of with those other analysts that you point to. I mean, Putin needs to get to the negotiating table. I think there may still be this idea somewhere in the back of his mind where he thinks that he can still win this war, that he can still take Ukraine, that if he just gets a couple more months, he can still make a bit more progress, get a bit more territory. I think it's time to just say that enough is enough here. This is done. Let's figure it out. Take Crimea. Take those eastern provinces, which is probably going to be what has to happen. I'm not saying that that's a good thing that happens. I'm saying this is the practical reality that we have to deal with, and that's probably the only solution that's going to get peace here. He needs to get to the table, and he needs to have those discussions. I think the main sticking point for Russia is also going to be NATO membership. So NATO membership has got to go. That cannot be not just off the table. It can't be anywhere near the table for Ukraine. That's got to go. There were, I don't know if they're still at this, but a few months ago it was reported that the Russians were open to allowing Ukrainian membership of the European Union, which would be quite a big concession. But yeah, he needs to get to the table, and he needs to show that he's serious about ending the conflict. You see, Trump is apparently increasingly frustrated with Russia and Putin and trying to get something done here as well. I'm not sure where Steve Witkoff is right now, but we need to perhaps break him back out and get him back into Russia and have these discussions really take off once again. I think ultimately a deal can be reached here, but all sides need convincing that it is possible. If one side doesn't think that it's possible, or one side has still got this idea in the back of their mind that they're going to break the terms of it, or they think they're going to get the best result of the deal, that's not going to happen. There's going to need to be some concessions on both sides. Putin himself, he's getting older and older every day now as well. How much longer is he going to be around? Not really sure. I could also perhaps even say it's the same for Donald Trump on that particular point as well, right? He's a lot older than he looks. Let's get to the table. Let's figure this out. Let's fix some legacy problems for both of these people, perhaps irreparable problems in some ways. But let's try and do something positive. I think for Putin, he's got increasingly closer to China as a result of this whole conflict. If you look at that relationship from a 10,000 foot view and you look down on it, and if you're honest about it, is Russia ever going to be on equal terms with China in that relationship? I'd say probably not. It's going to be second at best in that relationship. So this is somewhat of an opportunity for Putin to reconfigure Russia's place in the world. Do you want to orient yourself to the east? Do you want to go with China and play second fiddle to China, which you're always going to be? Or do you want to maybe try and do something to fix relations with the West? Not necessarily get in bed with the West, but do you want to do something to fix this, to try to get yourself back into somewhat of a positive position with the Western world? I did, however, mention with Jason Burmas when I was on his show a couple of weeks back, that it's also possible that this Eastern bloc that's emerging, this Eastern New World Order, may just say, you know what? Forget the West. We're done. We're moving onwards and upwards. The Trump tariffs, we don't care. The sanctions, we don't care. We're going to do business amongst ourselves. We're going to look to India for a growing market. We're going to look to Brazil. We're going to look to China. We're going to look to South Africa, all of these different places. And we're going to instead break away from the West, which broadly is not good, of course, for the Western world. But that is increasingly an option. I think this is probably a central point for everything we've discussed so far. It's no longer the 1990s I think there's a lot of people in the Western foreign policy establishment that think the West is still number one, is still the top dog, can still do whatever it wants, that we're still in the, quote, end of history, that now there are no other options, it's only the West. That's no longer the case. There is this Eastern Bloc. There is this Eastern New World Order. So what's going to happen with this? Is it going to continue to grow? Is it going to break away? Is it going to come to dominate the West? Are they going to clash together? Which is, of course, Graham Allison's thesis. Broadly, I don't think this, however, is potentially great. We're definitely in a state of flux geopolitically in the world right now. And let's just say it's going to be a very interesting next few years on this planet.
I'm going to just real quick on Ukraine before moving on, put on my tinfoil hat for a second, as I like to do. And I posted recently, Sergei Glaziev, the Russian minister, came out and talked about the Union State. He says the Union State is a model of the future, one of the directions for the revival of the unity of Russia, Belarus, and Ukraine. And this Union State idea has been germinating. What do you call? What's the word? The other word with the G, I'm forgetting now. Marinating for a few years, and it's been this idea of merging Belarus and Russia, like a European Union style, like in a supranational regional union form. And here you have Glaziev now saying, let's add Ukraine to the mix. And this Eurasian Union, Dugin came out recently and saying we want to create a macro state, a Eurasian Union, and other research I've done in the past, studies have shown that basically this Eurasian Union is a carbon copy of the European Union, which is a globalist construct. And I'm thinking lately one of the reasons that the Ukraine war was provoked was to help accelerate and catalyze the creation of the Eurasian Union. And so I could see at some point when this war finishes, however it finishes, they might say, oh, okay, we're going to, Ukraine's going to join the Eurasian Union that's now forming with Belarus and Russia, and then you'll have the Stans join later. Maybe that won't happen. Maybe they'll want to keep Ukraine in the EU. We've recently seen talk about, the EU empire. It was news in recent days that Bosnia, they're trying to push Bosnia into the EU, and Montenegro and Macedonia and Serbia. But I think the point is that we are the name of the game are regional unions, and you got to pick one. And so at the end of the day, you might have Serbia go with the Eurasian Union, or you might have it go with the EU. You got to pick one. And so I think this was interesting, and also the Cocainegate. Right, we had Starmer, Macron, and
let me pause before you go to that one. Let me quickly comment on that what you just said. So yeah, I think that's absolutely a possibility. If you're Russia, if you're China, and you look at the world, what do you see? You see NATO, you see the European Union, you see the UN, you see these entities, you see the IMF, you see the World Bank, you see these transnational entities that have come to monopolize lots of political, military, and economic power across the world. And they are transnational institutions that have, to a great extent, completely eroded national sovereignty in a lot of ways, completely eviscerated the idea of democracy, that you can vote for leaders and they'll be able to come in and change things for the better. Well, you can't do that if you're tied into these transnational control systems, if you're tied into these transnational institutions that have these massive long-term game plans that are completely disconnected from the idea of national control and national democracy. So if you're Russia and you're China and you're seeing all of that playing out, and it's to some extent at least been working, at least in terms of generating political and economic power, and military power as well, to some extent, you're going to want to emulate that. So this, I think, is absolutely possible. We've already kind of seen it with BRICS, which kind of fell apart. Now it's kind of coming back together. It's definitely not as closely knit of a union as the European Union proper actually is. But yeah, you're going to absolutely see this. And we're going to live in a world, like I was just alluding to, where you're either going to have the Western-oriented New World Order, Western-oriented globalism versus Eastern-oriented globalism. And I think I've said this with you before. Neither of those systems is going to be good for you as an individual. Neither of those systems is going to look at you and say, yeah, we want to give you wealth and rights and power. No, that's not what these do. There has never been a single example of a geopolitical entity like that giving the sovereign individual more power for themselves, more freedom, more decision-making authority. That's never happened. So while this, I think we're going to see it play out, and for the reasons that I just articulated, that they want to emulate a system that has to a great extent worked for those in power. It's not worked for us, it's worked for those in power. The real solution here is to get back to nation versus nation, nation working with nation, sovereignty versus sovereignty, respect for the individual, respect for the nation state. But how do you get back to that? Well, the world has tried that one time and time and time again, and that hasn't always gone great either. I mean, if you raise the idea of nationalism, you're immediately gonna walk down the road that heads down some really dark paths and ends in really dark, degenerate, evil situations as well. So how you get back to that system, I think you got to be very, very, very careful with. We already see the rise of lots of different forces around the world right now, which are perhaps pointing in that direction, and maybe will have some disastrous consequences as a result. But broadly, I think heading back to the nation state, heading back to individual sovereignty, heading back to where your vote actually matters for something as opposed to absolutely nothing, which is really my thesis right now, that your individual vote is essentially useless. I think trying at least to get back to that is the broad solution. But again, you got to be very careful because the path to nationalism has taken some very dark turns.
Yeah, and I'm glad you pointed out that multipolarity. I don't see it as good guys versus bad guys. It's all just bad guys, and the state is the state, and it's never going to. It's always against us, the individuals. And real quick on, I saw you share as well. I guess this was you on Burmis, the Cocainegate. Michael Tracy. He's saying, guys, this is stupid. It's an algorithmic wasteland. X that was just a tissue, and I think this is important, that we can't just go with this clickbait stuff in all media. You have to be, as much as you might want to. And I'm saying I actually have no idea. Does anyone have an actual official idea of what, was it cocaine or not? It may have been, it may have not been. These guys are insane, evil, sinister elites who do insane things. Some of them, are involved with probably Aleister Crowley-like human sacrifices and pedophilia. Not all of them, but I don't doubt that a percentage of them are doing seances to summon the devil and stuff like that. Crowley actually did, but I'm sure they're doing cocaine and all that sort of stuff. But so it's very plausible. But at the Michael Tracy is being a voice of reason here, and pointing out maybe it was just tissue. I don't know. What do you think? What do you think?
Yeah, I usually try to avoid these as well, but I think with this one, it looks like something is going on here. I'm not entirely sure what it is, but I think the immediate mainstream media reaction to it of this is absolutely nothing, this is Russian propaganda. That's where I step back and say, wait a second. A lot of stuff has apparently been Russian propaganda and actually turned out to be pretty accurate. So yeah, I wouldn't put it past these people. Like I said to you before we started recording, I have a hard time seeing Keir Starmer as a cocaine user. But I don't know, the whole reactions, I mean, it's kind of weird. The whole scene, the looks on their faces, how he tries to hide it and drag it off the table and put it in the other hand. It looks weird. So yeah, I usually don't comment on stuff like that either, but I thought that one was particularly strange.
But anyway, and he had the Russians. Zakharova came out saying purportedly, looks like the Frenchman and Englishman and German boarded a train and took a hit. But I mean, if it is what it purports to be, Cocainegate, and as you say, and the fact that it was being filmed, like I don't think that there was some what do you call it, like a gonzo camera that just came in. Like they were aware that they were going to be filmed. So it's almost in that sense it would have been staged or manufactured for for world opinion. But then why would that be done? I think it goes to the globalist. One of the theories of what the globalists are trying to do is knock the West down a peg. So then create this just increasingly. We had the Biden dementia years. Right, we got all these clowns, Zelenskys and von der Leyens and Starmers, and it seems like they're being thrown off the boat. There's the other story that von der Leyen now is finally, some heat's coming down on her court rules and von der Leyen's secret COVID vaccine deal messages. So maybe if it was real and if it was manufactured to create this just increasingly worse public opinion of the West, because it's going to be knocked down a notch for multipolarity. To rise. So any further thoughts on that? And then there's, get your thought on India-Pakistan.
Yeah, it's also possible that we are led by morons. And I think all three people in that room would fit that category. They are people that have an exceptionally high opinion of themselves, think that they can do no wrong, think that they are untouchable, and perhaps this was just a legitimate mistake, that there was something going on in that room, and then they said, yeah, let's go, let's bring the cameras in, we're ready for you. And then they kind of found out that they weren't. But yeah, it's broadly speaking, I tried to stay away from this stuff and just focus on their policies. But when you look at these people, when you look at where they come from, when you look at their personal histories, let's just say it doesn't always point to the best among us, to say the least. And C. Wright Mills in The Power Elites, he does a full sociological study of American elites in the 1950s, and how that creates this structure of power elites. And while it's not so much about their drug use habits, it is about who these people are and where they come from and the schools they attended and the universities they go to, and how all this stuff creates their worldview, creates their position within the society, within the power structure, and therefore allows them to continually reinvent themselves and stay in power for a continued period of time. So yeah, this is an interesting one. It will probably amount to nothing. But like you said, I think it does point to the fact that there are real issues that the people we've got in charge. Briefly, not to really go down the road of this one. Look at Canada. Canada just elected an out globalist, Mark Carney, former governor of the Bank of England. If populations can be so easily manipulated into voting for these people, there's almost no hope for the democratic system, period. And then where do you go from that? Again, that's not a question I have an answer for.
Yeah.
Perhaps we'll pass off political power to the AI overlords.
Well, that's the plan.
The plan.
That's the plan. Oligocracy, pretty soon. Just real quick, India, Pakistan. I don't see. Again, it's in flux, so nothing, no conclusions here yet. Things haven't really escalated, and I've mentioned this before. Pippa Malmgren also mentioned this, that begging the question that maybe the terror attack was instigated by the West to get the two sides fighting each other, and this skirmish now is being used as a way to test new technology. Isn't it funny how all of these events are being used to test always new technology? COVID was used to test the QR codes and the digital passports, and Ukraine now. Eric Schmidt came out and said Ukraine, it's going to be used to bring about Skynet, effectively, that we're going to move from a Ukrainian man with a rifle and a Russian man with a rifle, where we're going to get rid of the human equations. Or, he's like, it doesn't make sense to send fighter jets with humans in them. We don't need that anymore. We can have robotically autonomous remote controlled fighter jets and remote controlled robodogs and remote controlled drones. So we can take, and the wars will be fought over the internet. And the Ukrainian military operator will be at a cafe in Kyiv, and the Russian will be in Moscow, and they'll be controlling the Skynet robots fighting each other. And then in IndiaPakistan, you got the Chinese jets that are being, I believe, used by the Pakistanis, and then you got the Russian equipment, the French, of course, jets from the Indian side, and so this is now China unveiling its military equipment. So hopefully it doesn't escalate. But there was a study published in 2019. Again, and it's funny how they simulate all of these events that literally happened. There was some study in 2019 that simulated a nuclear conflict between India and Pakistan. Is that going to happen? If it does, that would be a great pretext, again, COVID style, to get rid of civil liberties and free speech and bring in rationing and martial law. So again, that is one possible scenario. Hopefully it doesn't get to that. But as you, I think, were alluding to a bit earlier, maybe this is also seems like really a flashpoint of geopolitics, where they're trying to get India to pick a side. Pick China already. Because India is in the middle, and they're like, pick Washington or China already. So it seems like they're pushing for their feelers there, and China as well has been trying to build its Belt and Road, CPEC, and all that through Pakistan, and so this is also one way to disturb that. Just your thoughts on that region?
Yeah, absolutely. It's really important to remember this is a new world order of globalist technocrats. These transnational elites believe there is a technological solution to everything. That if we can just manufacture something, some new machine, some new piece of software, some new weapon, that is going to be the solution to all of our problems. And this really is the central focus of my PhD thesis, which looks at the idea of a transnational military industrial complex, which produces, deploys hyper-advanced technological systems to address what it sees as its problems. And you see it time and time and time again. And for recent history, that means an almost laser-pointed focus on things like artificial intelligence, on things like robotics, on things like cognitive warfare, which I've been trying to put a journal article together on, NATO's cognitive warfare program, where they have been seriously studying everything from chemicals to implants to computer systems that can be used to alter the human mind in various ways. They really believe that if they can do this stuff, they will not only solve their problems, but also increase their area of global control. So this is absolutely the focus of these transnational globalists, because they are technocrats. They really believe in this technological system. They believe in the ability of solving things with technology. Now, when it comes to IndiaPakistan, I think you did a great job of laying it out. I have not looked at this in massive detail yet, but you basically alluded to where I am, Havori, which is we need to now start asking the question, who is geopolitically benefiting from this event? Who is going to win here? Is it going to be China? Is it going to be the West? Who has an incentive to get these two sides at each other's throats, which doesn't take a lot, right, when it comes to these two. And the important thing to remember here, which I'm not sure many people, perhaps your audience, but in the wider world, are really aware of this, but this is two nuclear powers. These are two states that do not only hate one another, but have nuclear warheads pointed at one another. And this could easily blow up in that direction. So we've had this ceasefire now, which I'm not putting too much weight on this just yet, and we've already had multiple accusations on both sides of them breaking the ceasefire. And things like this. But I think your thesis is, I think it may be edging towards reality. We know that China and India have had various border clashes over the recent decades, over disputed regions, over disputed lines on the map. So yes, as you said, could this be an attempt to make India pick a side? I think absolutely that the possibility is there. Now, the problem with a lot of this broadly, though, and perhaps for the whole root of our discussion, is that these discussions, I think, tend to be limited into just this alternative media field. We need to start getting this out into the mainstream. We need to get these discussions out, get people asking similar sorts of questions, and really getting them to hold their governments to account. I'm in academia. I'm trying to get my PhD done, trying to get it defended, trying to get it revised to the standards of the examiners. And that's just an endless battle as well. It's just an endless battle to try to get any alternative ideas or critical questions of the global geopolitical order through to people that you would think, at least in the case of academics, that would be critical thinkers, that would be open to new ideas, that would want to question these established power structures. So we have a lot of institutional forces that are working against us: academia, mainstream media, the entrenched globalist governments that we have scattered across the Western world. But I think if we can keep asking questions, keep talking to one another, and being open to all sides, which, like I said at the start, you absolutely are, I think then we could start to make some progress. So hopefully we can end here on somewhat of an optimistic note with that.
You just, what you mentioned about your experience in academia just brought like a very, what's it called? A very
Powerful
visual
flashback.
Like I could actually, because it doesn't often happen, because I try sometimes to go back into my memories, because, it's all very hazy. And I'm trying to search through and bring back memories and experiences. And I just had this very I can't think of the word again. I've been struggling. My computer has been repaired, and so I was up till 3 a.m. reinstalling Windows and all my files, and so I got a bit of a brain fart. But to my thesis defense in Geneva, would have been December 2009, and I did my master's on color revolutions. And of course, you had the head of the university, I guess some of the other professors, I think it was my mentor, my thesis advisor. So he understands the New World Order. But when I was talking about color revolutions and all these regime changes, the Orange Revolution, the Red Revolution, the USAID, Open Society, all this, NED, some of the reactions by these mainstream, examiners, their eyes sort of widened. And it's like, on the one hand, some of them were like, conspiracy theorist guy, right? But the other, I think the other part of the reaction was like they knew it was true, but that somebody was daring in the academic space to go deeper now. And it's like kind of like that was interesting. Like either they're cowards or they agree with this liberal globalist apparatus and they don't want people talking about it. So I think it was a bit of both. Some of them were like, you're edging on conspiracy theory, or, oh, he's starting to talk about this stuff. What do we do? So I just, this is interesting. And I was worried, but eventually the thesis was fine. Yeah. Any other thoughts? Anything that's going on in UK or Europe? Starmer is all. I saw you commenting. This 180. We're often seeing this now. All of a sudden, Starmer's talking about migration, but everyone that I read that's British says don't believe him. Obviously, he's a liar. But just any thoughts? Anything else that's important? Or UK or Europe?
Yeah, we can quickly touch on Starmer and Britain. I mean, we're looking at a government here now that has politically crashed, unlike, I think, anything in recent history. So they come into power, the Labour Party, the supposedly leftist Labour Party, and the very first thing that they do is cut off a winter fuel allowance to pensioners. So the first thing the supposedly leftist government does is go after the pensioners. That should tell you everything you need to know about this government. But of course, it goes a lot further than that. We got complete support for Ukraine, endless support for Ukraine that's apparently coming from Britain as a result of this. We've got Keir Starmer, who has openly pushed the military-industrial complex as the solution to Britain's economic woes. In other words, we get national economic growth by investing in national security. Well, we've heard that in a lot of dangerous historical scenarios as well, and that never plays out well because you are dealing with an industry that is incentivized to cause violence and be involved with violence. And what has that done for our world? Nothing good at all. But yeah, when it comes to immigration, this is the stuff that you can see exactly what is going on here. We've got a Labour Party and a Conservative Party that are politically dead. And there is a figure who is coming to replace them. Like him or not, that is Nigel Farage. He is coming. The Reform Party is coming. So we just had a local council election across the United Kingdom, and the Labour Party and the Conservative Party were essentially wiped out, and the Reform Party was crowned as the heir apparent to British politics. Now, Farage is by no means perfect, but at this point, I would absolutely take him over either of these other two sides. I think Starmer in particular is the most dangerous British Prime Minister since Tony Blair. If your solution to economic downturns is building up the military-industrial complex, while you're also supporting an endless war in Ukraine, while you're also supporting Israel with intelligence and weaponry, you are a threat to world peace. So I think Keir Starmer is immensely dangerous as a politician. And what do we know politicians do when they are politically in the toilet? They'll turn to foreign affairs. They'll turn to starting wars. So I think this is now a very real danger. And I think Farage, he hasn't said all of the greatest things on Ukraine and Russia in particular, NATO. But again, I still would take him over the other two options at the moment. And you also mentioned the immigration stuff. So in the last 24 hours since recording this, Starmer has essentially come out and said that immigration is terrible. It needs to end. It's destroying Britain. We're a nation of strangers, I think was the term that he used, which was pretty dramatic for someone that would have been the diversity is our strength leader, right? He would have been leading that crowd just a couple of years ago. So yeah, this is all a complete fraud. But the thing is now, people really see through it. Ordinary people are seeing through it. They're not seeing through it in Canada for whatever reason. Perhaps that could be the Donald Trump effect, perhaps, and everything that happened there with the 51st state. But in Britain right now, people are done with the mainstream parties. They are done with Labour. They're done with the Conservatives because you can see straight through them. These people have no values whatsoever. They only serve themselves and the vested interests in the country that already exist. And they have sold everyone else down the river. And people are tired of it and they've had enough and they're now going to give Farage a chance. So bar something shocking happening, I think Farage is going to be the next Prime Minister of the United Kingdom in 4 years' time. I've never really made big predictions like that before, but I think that is certainly on the cards, and I think that's likely to happen. Bar, of course, again, perhaps another plane crash that Nigel Farage might find himself in, which he's experienced before. The odd, strange plane crash and other odd things that have happened to him in the past. That's just when he was rattling the cage about the European Union and getting out of that. So if it looks like he's going to take charge, are the gloves really going to come off? Politically and through the intelligence? services and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, Britain's got a lot of problems. It's also got brain drain going on. There's a general lack of hope, which I think is just not fantastic. I went back to the United Kingdom for the first time in quite a few years last year, and you can just you get that vibe from people that people are just not happy, that everyone's kind of down in the dumps, doesn't really see anything to look forward to, doesn't see anything to be optimistic about. And it's really sad, honestly. So there does need to be some quite dramatic change. Will Farage be that change? We can hope, but it's not guaranteed.
What was Obama's slogan? Hope. Do you recall? Hope something. Hope and change.
Yeah, hope and change. Yeah, hope and change.
Well, the world's gone mad, and all we can do is full steam ahead. Full steam ahead. What will be will be. We've covered a lot. I know you've been busy with PhD teaching. Here comes the summer. Any final thought? Where can people find you? Are you going to fire up your analysis again?
Yeah, absolutely. So for a while, I've been putting out videos on current affairs and geopolitics and my own view and analysis, which for your viewers tends to come from somewhat of a similar perspective, where I don't really look at it from the left or the right, but just kind of trying to take it down the middle and just think, well, what's actually happening here? Who's actually benefiting? Who's actually losing? Who's really in charge in the world? Which a lot of people don't really have the capability of asking that question in a lot of ways. But yeah, I'm on TikTok, YouTube, X, Facebook. Just search for Stuart J Hooper. You'll find me. And I put out regular analysis, whether that's just in tweets or videos. And looking to start up the videos quite heavily in the coming summer months for sure. And there's a lot to comment on. And I really appreciate new followers and appreciate the time here and people sharing my stuff, sharing your stuff. And the only way we can have these conversations and have these ideas is if viewers share it. So yeah, you may not be able to financially support everyone. We don't, of course, expect that. If you can at least share the videos, share the podcast, that helps a lot. And maybe, like I said at the start, if we can have more people at least asking these questions, having these discussions, maybe we can move forward in somewhat of a positive way.
All right. As they say in Mongolia, summer well. And if the world doesn't blow itself up, over the summer, we'll get an update from you sometime later in the year. Thank you.